Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys have been well, and I hope you guys are excited about today's discourse. I know you guys have been going through so much lately, and the energies have been very interesting. So, today we are going to talk about a topic that I think many of you guys are probably like thinking about. So, I'm so glad you are here. I am so glad you are here because today's discourse is one that goes straight to the core of what's really happening inside our divine masculines, inside our beloved divine masculines right now. So, today's topic, it's not just about awakening, it is about rebirth. Like totally. It is about rebirth. It is about a rebirth that happens through something that I would call the sacred wound. The very pain that our divine masculine tries to avoid his whole life. And that becomes the key to his transformation. So if you have ever asked yourself, why does our divine masculine have to suffer so much before he wake? Oh, he wakens. He awakens. Apologies for that. Or why did he push me away when all I wanted was love? Then this teaching will give you the deep clarity and peace that you're looking for. So, every divine masculine must die before he can truly live. Not physically, but in ego, illusion, and control. So, that's the thing, right? Every divine masculine has to go through this. When his old identity starts collapsing, the one he built on achievement, logic, and external validation, he's not failing. He's being stripped down to remember the truth. That's why I'm saying it's not a physical death, but the death of illusion, the collapse of the false armor that once defined him. What most would call like failure, heartbreak, or rock bottom, dark night of the soul, is in truth initiation. When a man awakens on the twin flame journey, he does not simply change. And you wouldn't want that. You would not want him to simply change. Like, truly, if he simply changes, then you're going to doubt everything. In fact, it should be gradual. So, what actually happens is our divine masculine disintegrates. Everything that once gave him identity, career, ego, logic, self control becomes useless against the tidal wave of the sacred wound. And yet, within that pain lies the blueprint of his rebirth. So, for centuries, masculine energy has been conditioned to equate strength with being stoic and control. But divine rebirth begins when our divine masculines realize that control is not mastery, it's actually avoidance. The sacred wound is not punishment, it's the soul's entry point into truth. And when the masculine, when our divine masculine, when our beloved divine masculine learns to face it, not flee, the light that enters through that wound becomes the very energy that wakes him up. So that's why when his old identity stops collapsing, he starts to realize the truth that the sacred wound isn't punishment, it is his initiation into real power. What looks like breaking is actually awakening. So, what is this whole myth of invulnerability? The cultural conditioning of emotional exile. From the moment our divine masculine is born, he was told, don't cry, be strong, man up. You see, that's why from childhood, most men are taught that feeling is weakness. truly, like don't cry, man up, be strong. These phrases carve deep grooves into the masculine psyche, teaching him that love must be earned through performance and protection. And that's when, you know, our divine masculine, these words, these situations that bring out that don't cry, be strong, man up, builds an emotional cage. And then, that's what he has learned to suppress softness and confuse silence for strength. But in reality, that suppression becomes his exile from his own heart, from his own internal wounds, from God. So when the cage begins to crumble, maybe it could be a loss, a heartbreak, being fired at work, or meeting us, his beloved divine feminine, he becomes terrified because that definition, that old definition of men, no longer fits. And this is not weakness, this is the dismantling of the false masculine. Sorry about that. Let me adjust my mic. Oops. Okay. This is the dismantling of the false masculine, the myth of invulnerability, so that the true divine masculine can finally rise. And in doing so, he starts to realize his potential. So, what is the sacred wound that I keep talking about? The sacred wound is actually a catalyst for awakening. Every divine masculine carries a sacred wound. The deep psychic imprint that defines his pain body. It could be rejection, abandonment, betrayal, or even a lifetime memory of failure. But the wound is not here to destroy him. It's here to remember, it's here to remind him. It's here to remember. It's here to remind him and to make him remember. So when he meets us, his beloved divine feminine, we don't cause the wound, we reveal it. You see, that's the problem. Our light exposes what has been buried. And that's why, divine masculines get so weird, They start being absolutely awkward. But that's why our divine masculine retreats. Not because he doesn't love us, but because he's suddenly face to face with every unhealed version of himself. And that's the cost of suppression. The price of this suppression is spiritual stagnation. He can't receive love because receiving requires vulnerability. He can't surrender because surrender feels like defeat. He can't express grief because grief feels like failure. So, our divine masculine begins to equate stillness with uselessness, silence with danger, and vulnerability with shame. That's why in the twin flame dynamics, this suppression starts becoming avoidance, ghosting, lashing out, or retreat. Because as the divine feminine, when we touch our divine masculine soul, his part of the soul, his body remembers, but his mind panics. Every repressed emotion, every unprocessed grief rises at once, and he mistakes awakening for collapse and connection for threat. That's why every ancient divine masculine went through this initiation. Osiris was dismembered before resurrection. Lord Shiva retreated. Lord Shiva retreated into ashes before reuniting with Parvati. So these are the mythical mirrors of rebirth. Each myth carries the same spiritual truth. Pain is the purification that returns our divine masculine to his original divine essence. The sacred wound is not an obstacle, it's a passageway. That's the reason why. That is the reason why every, every repressed emotion, every unprocessed grief rises all at once. And our divine masculines mistake it for collapse. He's actually mistaking awakening for collapse and connection for threat. That's why he runs away from us. Totally, literally, metaphorically, physically as well. So this is the dissolution of the old masculine paradigm. We are living in an age where the myth of invulnerability is crumbling. Men are being called through heartbreak, failure, and even humiliation to return to the sacred wound they have denied, because only through that wound can they rediscover their heart. And this is not the fall of men, it's the fall of the false masculine. And as it falls, what rises is not weakness but authenticity. So let's redefine the sacred wound. The sacred wound is not accident. It's the soul's chosen portal for remembrance. Every divine masculine carries one. The father's absence, the mother's disconnection, the betrayal, the failure, the unhealed guilt of lifetimes where love equated to loss. But what makes it sacred is not the pain itself, it's the consciousness that pain awakens. When our beloved divine masculine meets us, his beloved divine feminine, we unknowingly touch the wound. We don't create it, we reveal it. Our light is the mirror that makes the buried shadow visible. So that's why, every single story in history carries the same code. Only through wound can divine power return to integrity. The divine masculine wound is not the end of his power, it's the refinement of it. That's why in ancient initiations, young men were separated, made to face death, not to be destroyed, but to awaken vision. And the twin flame journey is the modern initiatory field. And the sacred wound is the first temple. So that's why pain is not punishment, guys. It's purification. The sacred wound forces our beloved divine masculine to confront what logic can't fix. It dissolves the illusion of control and reveals the raw truth of dependency on the divine, through complete surrender. Through pain, our divine masculine learns humility. Through loss, he learns love. Through darkness, he learns to see. The wound opens him to empathy, which is the seed of divine kingship. So that's why, you know, you got to see pain as an alchemical fire. Pain doesn't destroy our divine masculine, it burns off illusion. When he can't fix it, escape it, or suppress it, he will start to feel it. And that's where his heart cracks open. Through grief, he learns humility. Through loss, he learns compassion. Through darkness, he learns light. And this is the moment where his power stops being external and becomes spiritual. So let's go deeper into the stages of masculine rebirth. They unfold in three sacred phases of acknowledgement: processing, acknowledgement, processing, and integration. So, phase one, this is the moment our divine masculine stops pretending. He admits he's hurting, he's lost, he's afraid. It sounds simple, but it isn't. For the divine masculine psyche, this is revolution. The moment he speaks the truth, the illusion of control begins to dissolve. Number two, phase two, processing. Here comes the dark night of the soul. Everything he identified with, success, logic, status, no longer feels alive. He grieves the version of himself that used to work. He starts asking, who am I if I'm not what I achieve? This is where shadow work and conscious grieving come in. This is where our divine masculine must cry what his father couldn't. He must feel what his ancestors denied. He must forgive what his past selves forget. And phase three, integration. After the storm comes stillness. Integration is when he finally allows both his strength and sensitivity to coexist. He no longer rejects pain, he integrates it. Our divine masculine starts leading from peace, not pride. And this is what, I want to emphasize. This is the return of our beloved divine masculine king. He reclaims his authority not over others, but over his own inner world. That's the reason why the first step is recognition. Our divine masculines must look directly at the wound. And that's the thing, right? Most divine masculines resist the first stage because it feels like failure, right? That whole acknowledgement, seeing what was denied stage. But denial only deepens suffering. So that's why when he finally admits that he is hurting, he is lost, he is terrified, the alchemy begins. In the surrender, the false armor starts to crack, and that's when the light can enter. So that's why the processing stage, stage two that I've been talking about, is the crucifixion moment. It's where the old self dies, but the new self hasn't emerged. This is where our divine masculine may withdraw. He questions everything, right? He questions every single thing: relationships, faith, purpose, career, life, friendships, acquaintances, travel, living. Nothing feels stable because stability itself was built on illusion. And that's when he grieves the identity that he once worshipped: the achiever, the provider, the protector. And now he faces the terrifying question: who am I if I'm not that? That's why, the emphasis on shadow work, conscious grieving, and emotional release becomes his tools of transformation. He must cry it out. He must feel it out. He must forgive it. And this process is not linear, guys. You know that. It's not linear at all. It spirals. Each spiral burns another layer of illusion. And that's why, you see, the integration, the stage three, is when the divine masculine no longer rejects his pain, he integrates it into wisdom. He realizes that sensitivity does not make him weak, it makes him whole. His decision begins to rise from intuition, not ego. He starts to listen, truly listen to life, to his own body, to us, the divine feminine. So, in the alchemical language, you know, this is the stage. The resolidification of self after dissolution. The gold is formed only when he can hold both shadow and light without rejecting either. That's when our divine masculine becomes the living bridge between heaven and earth. No longer a boy running from pain, no longer a boy running away from us as though we can do anything, right? But a man leading from truth. So, this is where we are going to talk about reclaiming authentic masculinity. What authentic truly means. I know we keep talking about it, right? What is this authentic? Truly, what authentic truly means? Authentic masculinity is not performance, it's presence. It's not domination, it's direction. It's not control, it's containment. When the divine masculine rebirth occurs, he no longer seeks validation through conquest or approval. He's anchored in his inner authority, silent, stable, and transparent. Authenticity arises when his power and compassion finally coexist. A healed masculine, a healed divine masculine, doesn't run from love, he leads it. He knows that intimacy will trigger him, but he no longer punishes connection for awakening his fears. He allows us, the divine feminine, to see his humanity not as weakness but as devotion. He begins to lead not by control but by coherence. And that's when our divine masculine's presence calms, his words restore, and his boundaries guide rather than restrict. And when this shift occurs in our twin flame dynamic, the polarity balances. And as the divine feminine, we no longer need to overfunction, and our divine masculine does not need to withdraw. Union becomes possible because not because we chase each other, but because we have become energetically compatible. That's why authentic masculinity is not dominance, it's direction. It's not control, it's containment. It's not performance, it's presence. When our divine masculine leads from this space, his words carry weight, not ego. His actions create safety, not fear. And that's why our divine masculine does not need to win us, the divine feminine. He goes into the stage of wanting to witness us. That's where he learns to hold space without trying to fix our emotions. That's when polarity harmonizes, not through chasing, but through coherence. So that's why, what is this divine masculine leadership in the new earth? Authentic masculinity in leadership looks radically different. Our divine masculine, as the divine masculine collective heals, the entire planet's energy shifts, because when men stop operating from fear, the world stops operating from war. Our divine masculine begins to lead not for status but for service. His vision is rooted in contribution. His leadership is presence based, not control based. And the true king protects life. He doesn't dominate it, you know. That's why he protects without possessing, he builds without exploiting, he holds power without needing superiority. He leads not from ego but from integrity. And that's why authentic masculinity in leadership looks radically different. The divine king archetype that I keep talking about, the one who rules by service, not status. And when the masculine heals, the collective heals, because the world reflects his inner state. Wars, greed, disconnection, all externalized wounds of the unhealed masculine psyche. As he rebirths, humanity finds stability again. So, what is the role of the divine feminine in his rebirth? Though the focus here is talking about our beloved divine masculine journey, we must honor the sacred polarity that catalyzes it, right? As the divine feminine, we are not the rescuer, we are the mirror. Our love does not save our divine masculine, it exposes him. And in that exposure, his false self begins to crumble. And when we embody stillness instead of pursuit, compassion instead of control, we become the midwife of his rebirth. We hold the frequency of unconditional acceptance, not to excuse his wounds, but to give his soul home, but to invite his soul home through us, right? So our task is not to drag him into awakening. I know many wounded divine feminines have a tendency to do that, but our role is to hold the portal open long enough for him to choose it, and he will. When the sacred wound becomes unbearable to ignore, that's what happens, right? That's why our role in his rebirth is sacred, All right. That's why when we stop chasing his potential and simply embody our wholeness, we become the portal that magnetically calls him home. So, what is the psychology of the sacred wound? What is the core split? Every divine masculine carries a subconscious belief: if I feel, I will lose control, lose respect, lose love. The belief originates from the mother wound, where emotional suppression was either invalidated or weaponized. So, divine masculine learned to equate emotional safety with silence. But in the twin flame mirror, this silence backfires because the divine feminine's energy, we feel everything, we sense when he refuses, we sense when he refuses to return, we sense what he refuses to name. And the resulting polarity tension is what activates his shadow. He begins to feel things he can't intellectualize. His nervous system perceives love as danger because to love us, he must feel again. So, rebirth must occur in the body, not just the mind, as our divine masculine softens, his heart chakra expands, his root stabilizes, and his solar plexus releases control. And this rewiring allows his nervous system to tolerate love instead of resisting it. In this sense, the sacred wound is both psychological and physiological. And our essence, the divine feminine's frequency, becomes the medicine that retrains his energetic architecture through breath, presence, and genuine connection. Through this, he learns that feeling doesn't kill him, it heals him. So, this is why we are witnessing an unprecedented collective shift. Men across the planet are breaking down, opening up, and awakening in ways that would have been unthinkable decades ago. Our divine masculines are questioning inherited definitions of success. They are stepping out of transactional relationships. Like, truly, that's why all these karmic connections for category one, it's breaking. And they are exploring consciousness, meditation, energy work, some even therapy. But this collective awakening is not gentle. It's like a volcano exploding, like truly. And the suppression of a millennium is erupting as crisis, burnout, divorce, and emotional breakdown. Each divine masculine who chooses to heal becomes a node of light for thousands who are not able to. Every healed divine masculine's nervous system stabilizes the planetary grid and the feminine collective. As the divine feminine collective, we feel it because when our divine masculine rises, our energy finally rests. So, what are some of the practical pathways for masculine rebirth, right? Shadow work big. Our divine masculines must face his inner critique, the one who whispers you're not enough, writing, meditation, that can help externalize the shadow voice. Naming it is reclaiming authority over it, right? Number two, conscious grieving. Tears are sacred. Crying rebalances the nervous system and clears karmic residue. I know so many of you guys talk to me telling me how, our divine masculines literally, like they cry, especially the pre-union stages. They talk about how many nights they had gone to bed crying because the divine masculine must be allowed to grieve, not suppress in silence or substance. Number three, physical embodiment practices. Like literally, it could be yoga, it could be dancing, it could be hitting the gym. Physical exercises that can help move stagnant emotional energy. That's why sometimes you will just notice your divine masculine going for a run every day, hitting the gym all the time, because a healthy divine masculine body supports a healthy divine masculine mind. Again, men need other conscious men. So when our divine masculine is in his wounded phase, he has a lot of wounded, weird friends. But when he awakens more and more, the need for other conscious men comes in. Spaces of vulnerability and honesty are temples of modern awakening if done right. Because here they can dismantle shame without that judgment. And then reconnection with the feminine energy, right? Not just romantic, but us, the divine feminine, in all things: art, music, intuition. This restores emotional fluidity, fluidity, and reminds him that life responds to openness, not force. So that's when we become that inspiration, for music, intuition, nature, art, and also reclaiming sacred sexual, oops, I can't say that word, reclaiming sacred making love energy. Rebirth is incomplete without making love. For the unhealed divine masculine, making love is escaped. For the reborn masculine, making love is a prayer, is divine. When our divine masculine learns to merge without conquest, to feel instead of perform, he re enters sacred union with us, the divine feminine, and his body becomes a vessel for devotion, not domination. And this is why many divine masculines on the twin flame journey experience as blockages or redirection, and the universe is teaching our divine masculine to move from lust to love, from instinct to integrity. And when he channels his desire through his heart, it becomes creation energy, the same force that births worlds. Well, the third energy I'm talking about. So this is the integration into mission and purpose. Rebirth naturally leads to mission. A healed divine masculine can't seat idle, right? His soul demands service, but now service is not obligation, it's overflow. He no longer works to prove himself, but to contribute to collective harmony. His presence in community becomes a catalyst, right? He builds systems of care, leadership rooted in empathy, and technologies aligned with consciousness. So this is when you will see your divine masculine creating apps, that will help humanity. It may look very superficial on a surface level, It's like literally, it could look like like he's going down the rabbit hole. But there's always multiple meanings to it. So every reborn masculine is a bridge between the metaphysical and the material, proof that spirituality and strength can coexist. And that's why he's building technology aligned with consciousness. So this is where the divine feminine will be witness. This is how we recognize our beloved divine masculine's rebirth. When the divine masculine truly rebirths as the divine feminine, we feel it in our field before we see it in form. We sense the shift, the stability, the grounded love, the silent confidence. Our divine masculine may still be in silence physically, but energetically, the field feels different, coherent, present, no longer reactive. Our divine masculine stops defending his identity and starts honoring the connection. His words, when they return, carry vibration rather than validation. And this is the moment when many unions stabilize, really. Not because of a text or a meeting, but because the field itself locks into harmony. So I want to really talk about the rebirth archetypes from boy to king. Number one, the wounded boy defines himself through rejection, reacts to emotion, seeks external control. Number two, the shadow knight, defends illusions, runs from vulnerability, uses intellect to avoid intimacy. Number three, the breaking point, right? The wound reopens, everything collapses. And then number four, the pilgrim, right? Surrenders ego, searches for meaning, begins emotional reckoning. And finally, the king embodies integrated wisdom, acts from peace, loves without fear. Each masculine will cycle through these stages many times. And rebirth is not once, it's perpetual refinement. That's why let's look at the new definition of sacred power. Power is no longer how much our divine masculine controls, it's how much consciousness he carries. A healed divine masculine radiates power quietly. He doesn't need to prove, persuade, or perform. His mere presence shifts rooms. His integrity communicates louder than his words. That's why in a relationship, this power becomes containment, a space where, as the divine feminine, we can feel safe to expand. In society, This is leadership by resonance, not domination, right? This is when the world is asking, this is what the world is asking of, of this kind of man. Not bigger egos, but broader hearts. So that's why, to every divine feminine, who is holding the vision of our beloved divine masculine, you know, of all the divine feminines who are in that pre union stage, the vision of his return. Remember, rebirth is not a one time event, it's a lifelong initiation. But having said that, pain becomes the teacher, loss becomes the light. And through every sacred wound, our divine masculine remembers what we already knew as the divine feminines. Love was never meant to be controlled, it was always meant to be remembered. That's why the masculine's rebirth doesn't end when he feels healed. Each new level of consciousness invites a deep surrender. The wound that once bled now becomes a compass guiding him through authenticity. Every time he chooses vulnerability over avoidance, truth over pride, compassion over control, he rebirths again. So, this is what, divine masculines who are like reborn again, like literally, who go through a rebirth. They start speaking the truth. They feel before fixing. They honor emotions, So that's why, to every divine masculine out there, divine masculines were never meant to be perfect. Divine masculines were meant to be present. That's why the world doesn't need our divine masculine's armor. It needs our divine masculine's authenticity. It doesn't need our divine masculine to be stoic. It needs his heart, And that sacred wound is not shame. It's a map. Through it, he remembers the God within him. And I'm like, let me see. Oh, wow. I didn't expect this discourse to be so long, but I'm going to try to wrap up. So when the wound becomes a portal, there comes a moment in every divine masculine awakening, the rebirth stage, when he's like completely, from wounded divine masculine, he's reborn into awakening divine masculine, right? When pain stops feeling like punishment and he starts feeling like intuition, he realizes the wound was never here to destroy him, it was here to remind him, and this shift usually arrives after the external collapses. That's why, the second part, we are going to look inside the process, the initiation, the mirrors, and the embodiment, that turn pain into purpose. So that's why our divine masculine realizes that the wound was never here to destroy him. It was here to remind him, right? Again, let's delve deeper into that. The shift usually arrives after external collapses, him losing his job, or him suddenly resigning, or him being upset that his work is sending him to another country or another state and he just doesn't want to be there, and things are going out of control and he's losing his benefits, he's losing the perks in his work, he just doesn't want to move, so he resigns. Or in category 1, the karmic partner starts demanding, starts being too much, and then their own internal self-image, the plans that once defined his worth, when the outside no longer offers refuge, when the outside world does not offer refuge, our divine masculine has no choice but to turn inward. right? The wound becomes the doorway, the breakdown becomes the initiation, the pain becomes prayer. Because our divine masculine learns that his own heart, the very organ he feared, is the temple through which divine communicates. And each ache is revelation in disguise. So there are five initiations of rebirth, right? Initiation one, the collapse of control. Our divine masculine must first lose what he cannot keep. Control has been his religion, right? So letting go can feel like death, but this collapse dismantles the illusion of mastery and reveals dependence on the divine. Initiation 2, the exposure of shame. He confronts the parts of himself he once buried: inadequacy, guilt, envy, fear of failure. When he stops hiding, shame loses its power, its teeth, and what once poisoned him now purifies him. Initiation 3, descent into stillness. Silence becomes the teacher, silence becomes the teacher. In the void, he hears when the noise, once drowned out, is his own soul. Solitude, meditation, or even heartbreak becomes the monastery. An initiation for reconciliation with the divine feminine. He begins to feel the pain he caused others and the pain others caused him. Through empathy, he reconnects to us, the divine feminine. And forgiveness blooms as understanding, not as forgetting. And the final initiation, emergence of purpose. Out of stillness comes direction, not ambition, but calling. He understands his gifts as instruments of service. Leadership becomes the norm. And these five initiations echo through every twin flame journey. They are the spiral steps from separation to sovereignty, right? So, this is the mirror of the divine feminine. As the divine feminine, we are really, really not here to rescue our divine masculine. We are here to reveal him. I will repeat this over and over again through all my discourses, because our love is frequency, not formula. When our divine masculine, when we look at our divine masculine, and when he looks into our eyes, he doesn't just see beauty, he sees the truth of his own unlived self. That's what we mirror back. Every unhealed fragment, every suppressed desire to feel, to weep, to surrender. And that reflection terrifies him, because it means he must dismantle every wall he built for survival. But once he stops projecting his fear onto us, he realizes we were never the enemy. We were the compass pointing him home. Our stillness teaches him trust. Our boundaries teach our divine masculine respect. Our unconditional presence teaches him devotion. And in this sacred mirror, the divine masculine, goes through rebirth, not through us, but alongside us, as we are equal counterparts in consciousness, right? So this is the alchemy of emotion. For generations, men have been emotionally illiterate. The rebirth process rewires this completely. He begins to translate his emotions not as threats, but as information. Anger becomes a message about violated boundaries. Sadness reveals what stillness longs for love. you know Fear shows where faith has yet to land. And when he allows the energies to move through the body, transmutation occurs. Emotion becomes motion, energy that clears, cleanses, and corrects. And this is where the masculine discovers his true spiritual strength, the courage to feel everything without running from anything. So this is when, the healing of the father and mother blueprints begins. So every divine masculine carries two primary codes: the father blueprint and the mother blueprint. The father blueprint defines identity, what it means to be a man. When the father was absent or emotionally unavailable, the son internalized confusion, equating presence with pain. Rebirth means rewriting the script, learning that presence is love, not burden. And then the mother blueprint defines emotional safety. If the mother over nurtured, he may fear being engulfed. So that's why when we are like, you know, Totally, when we become like love bombers, or when we are like the over pleasing divine feminine, he starts to, the mother wound becomes triggered. And if the mother was distant, he may equate love with scarcity. Healing this blueprint teaches him that intimacy can coexist with autonomy, right? As these blueprints heal, he stops projecting unmet parental energy towards us. He no longer seeks a mother in his lover or a father in his mentor. He meets others as equals, not as substitutes. So that's the thing, right? From the knight to king, the masculine archetypical shift. The unhealed masculine operates as the knight, driven by conquest, dependent on approval, terrified of stillness. The masculine, the masculine, the masculine that goes through rebirth embodies the king, grounded, discerning, guided by divine order rather than egoic ambition. So the knight needs the battlefield to prove himself. That's why sometimes our divine masculine behaves like a freaking warrior. But the king needs the temple to remember himself. So when he shifts from knight, warrior to king, there is calmness. And this evolution is not arrogance, it's alignment. It's the return of sacred governance over his emotions, his desires, and destiny. And this is when the S energy is the most misused masculine currency. Rebirth transforms it from discharge to devotion. He learns to move energy up through the heart instead of out through the body. Pleasure becomes prayer. Union becomes offering. The rebirth that our divine masculines go through, after the rebirth, they understand that every encounter is an energetic exchange. Therefore, they start taking sacred responsibility. That's why, literally, it doesn't work with other women. It only works with his divine feminine. He no longer consumes the feminine for validation. He honors her as a co creator of life and light. And when he channels desire consciously, it fuels purpose, creativity, and divine growth. That's when his S energy becomes aligned with soul mission rather than shadow impulse. So this is when our role comes in, right? For the divine feminine, the hardest task is non-interference, which it's very difficult. We're all guilty of it, right? Practicing non-interference, the most difficult. But we must allow our divine masculine to meet his own pain. If we try to pull him out too early, like that discourse where I was talking about the cocoon phase, when we try to pull the caterpillar from the cocoon, we interrupt our divine masculine's initiation. We abandon our own heart waiting for his. We abandon the very energy that magnetizes home. Our sacred assignment is to embody coherence, to remain the frequency of unconditional love without collapsing into codependency. And this stability becomes the lighthouse guiding his ship through the storm. And when he's ready, he returns not to our arms immediately, but to his own soul and then to us, because one soul, right? So that's why, as thousands of divine masculines, millions of divine masculines undergo personal growth, the collective grid recalibrates. Governments, corporations, social systems built on domination begin to lose coherence. This is the birth of the new leadership. Compassion, integration, service based leadership starts to emerge. So that's why every healed divine masculine contributes to this ascension. Each time a divine masculine forgives his father, he comforts his inner child or listens instead of attacks, and the collective timeline shifts. The planet stabilizes not through technology but through consciousness, right? So, what is the signs that our divine masculine has gone through rebirth? He responds in states of react. So, he is no longer accusing the divine feminine of stalking or, why is she coming before him, literally running away from her, saying words like not interested. He doesn't react. He responds with love. He responds with calmness. He responds with apology. He responds with tenderness. He responds with softness. He doesn't lash out anymore. That's the reactions. This is the response. He protects without possession. He speaks truth without aggression. He listens without defensiveness. He leads through example, not command. And that's when our divine masculine cherishes us, not because he needs us, but because he recognizes us as him in another form, as him, you know, seeing himself in us and vice versa. You see, that's when our divine masculine's presence feels like safety, and his silence feels like peace, his love feels like truth. That's why rebirth naturally directs our divine masculine towards purpose, service that uplifts, builds, and heals. And this is when he starts leading, mentoring others, creating apps, innovating technology with consciousness and love, simply loving with integrity and whatever form it takes. Mission is no longer external achievement. It's internal coherence expressed outwardly. The divine masculine becomes living proof that spirituality and practicality are one continuum. So union cannot precede cannot precede rebirth, because union is not a relationship, it's resonance, right? So when both of us are ready, when both the divine masculine and the divine feminines are ready, they complete their inner initiation, the external connection activates organically, no longer chasing manipulation or proving, just alignment. And that wound that once separated becomes the bridge that joins you back together. That's why rebirth is not a single event, it's an eternal spiral. Each time he forgets, life will remind. Each time he resists, love will return in disguise. The sacred wound will always be there, not as pain, but as portal. Through it, our beloved, beloved, beloved divine masculine continuously rediscovers the truth that power and tenderness are the same frequency expressed differently. So, guys, I know this discourse is super long. Oh my goodness, it's 51 minutes. I don't do a discourse for a couple of days. This is what happens. I do one that is so long. So, with that, this is a lot to take in. But you know what? I really, really, really wanted to do a discourse that is like deep, And I know this is a lot, but a lot of you guys would be going through this phase. That's why finally I just want to talk about what happens, what's the purpose after the purge, right? After the whole, why rebirth is not just awakening, it's embodiment. It's when everything our divine masculine learned through pain finally takes form through purpose, love, and mission. And finally, this is when our divine masculine steps into sacred leadership, because now his soul begins to serve. And what union looks like when both energies are reborn, right? So, what is the purpose after the purge? Once the masculine emerges from his inner storm, a silence follows, but it's not emptiness, it's listening, right? He starts hearing the call of his soul mission. Where before he worked to prove his worth, now he creates to express his truth. His action shifts from survival to service. He no longer builds systems of control, he builds structures of harmony. Mission becomes love made visible. Literally, you will be having dreams like your divine masculine is like a wedding solemnizer, he's getting other people together. You will start getting a lot of confirmations, like when our divine masculine is actually going through that sacred service. Like literally, you might hear news that your divine masculine has created an app. He's an app developer, even though the app might not have any downloads or he might not be popular, but it's the intention behind the app, the service to humanity, because the healed divine masculine carries responsibility differently. It's no longer about carrying everyone's burden, it's about holding integrity. He becomes protector not through power but through presence. He becomes a leader not through dominance but through direction. People feel safe around him because he's done the work to feel safe with himself. And this is sacred kingship, the return of divine authority through humility. So that's why when we both reach inner rebirth, something extraordinary happens. The third energy awakens, right? The third energy that I talked about, the combined energy field, the merged energetic consciousness that carries through our healed frequency. That field is not romantic fantasy, guys. It's the truth. And that's when we become co creators of evolution itself, because we birth creations, new projects, purpose, realities. And that's why we become co-creators of evolution itself. Every conversation, every idea, every silence begins to become generative, right? Union at this stage is no longer about having each other, it's about serving the divine together. And this is what I call stable union, right? Truly, because this is when we are anchoring the mission into the material world. Mission must enter form, otherwise it remains vision without anchor. So that's why for our divine masculine, this looks like conscious leadership in the workplace. For others, it's creativity, innovation, or service projects that align with love consciousness. So purpose doesn't have to be public. It can be the way he speaks to a child, or the way he holds space for someone in pain. Every act done through awareness carries a planetary impact. So that's why our role becomes so important, right? So that's the reason why, you know, for us divine feminines, the message is this. Even in union, rebirth continues. Each level of consciousness invites a new surrender. Each new mission invites deeper humility. The sacred wound doesn't disappear, it becomes the well of wisdom that we draw from together, from the togetherness we share with our divine masculine. Through it we serve, through it we love, right? So, with that, we finally, let me see the time. Okay, I've not reached 1 hour yet, so I'm going to keep it within an hour. So, if you guys, you know, I know this is a deep discourse, and, you know, it is something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, because it's such an intricate part of the journey to address the divine masculine rebirth, right? It is so important that our divine masculines play such a crucial role in our journey. So, and we play a crucial role in our divine masculine's journey. So, guys, it's always about the flow, the divine flow, right? With that, I hope you enjoyed this discourse. And if you guys want to work one on one with me, you can do so via booking a session via the link in the description box. And, my sessions are all one on one, through Zoom, through video call, conducted by me. So you can ask me all the questions that you want answers to, you need answers to. So, with that, I'll see you all soon, and love you all, and take care, and bye bye.